Okay, we'll make a start, and I'll make a start by saying good afternoon, and thanks for coming along for another talk in our GenAI seminar series. Today's speaker is Torrey Trust, who is Professor of Learning Technology at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Torrey's work is at the intersection of learning, teaching, and technology, and gives particular attention to how educators like ourselves leverage digital tools, open educational resources, and emerging technologies, including, of course, generative AI, to support instructional design and to support classroom practice. Torrey's research and teaching work has received international recognition, and she is the author of 10 academic books, including her most recent publication, AI and Civic Engagement, which is a kind of a guidebook on how to use GenAI to support civic learning. Today, though, Torrey is joining us to give what promises to be a very engaging and very practical talk, introducing two recent frameworks to support effective learning and teaching both with and without AI. So in terms of format, we're going to go for something like 45 minutes of a presentation and then a bit of time left over for questions and discussion. As usual, those of you not attending live and just watching this as a recording will only get the presentation bit. Colleagues attending live, you can post questions as usual to the Q&A area in Zoom, and you can also upvote, but not downvote, the questions of others in the Q&A area. So look, I know you're in high demand and very busy, Torrey, and I know it's morning time over there. So thanks very much for accepting my invitation to do this talk for us. Okay, over to you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to chat with you about two frameworks, which I usually don't get a chance to chat about because I spend a lot of time just talking about AI. Now, to be fair, one of the frameworks is about AI, but the other one I'm super excited to share with you all today. So without further ado, we're going to get into this presentation. Again, my name is Torrey Trust, Professor of Learning Technology in the College of Ed at UMass Amherst. And I'm going to start today with a Super Bowl commercial in the United States. Super Bowl is the thing to watch. More than 100 million people watch this. And so it's important to take note of Super Bowl commercials and what they are promoting. So let's just watch this 30-second bit.
Jen Spark, give me the day off. I'm skipping work today. You should too, Stu. Jen Spark, finish this slide deck. Now you're not working from home. Hey, you put on pants. Jen Spark, dial in this spreadsheet.
Done?
Circle back on out of here. Let Jen Spark automate your work and take a day off.
Let GenSpark automate your work and take a day off. In fact, it seems like AI is everywhere, everything all at once, and offering to just automate your work for you. It's now at the top of Google search results. You have the AI overviews. You go to open up your Gmail and AI provides a summary of an email. And now even just writes the entire reply for you in an email. Or you're in Microsoft PowerPoint or Google Slides and you need images, you need a slide, you need an entire slide deck. AI can make that for you. You go to Google Scholar Labs and now AI can prepare a literature review for you. So how can educators increase rigor and improve engagement in the age of AI where students have access to tools that are offering to automate their lives, to make everything easier, to offload their thinking, their communication, and learning? One model that I came up for addressing this issue is the Trust model, aptly named after my last name. Finally got to use it as an academic. I think that was that's our life goal as academics, right? Find a way to put our last name into an acronym. So this model came from a lot of theories of motivation and learning, as well as my own practice as an educator. Each letter of the Trust model stands for something, and I'm going to walk you through each of these letters. We're going to start with transparency. I think this is one of the simplest and most impactful things that you could do even starting today or tomorrow with your practice that can change student motivation and interest in learning. So far too often, students are told to do something, write a paper, write a discussion forum post, reply to 3 peers in the discussion forum post, take an exam, and they're never really told why. And if they ask why, we look at them like, you know why. But they really actually don't know why we're asking them to do what we're asking them to do. Just take a look at this student who spent more time programming a 3D printer to handwrite AI-generated text than actually doing the assignment himself. He did not realize the purpose of the assignment. And so I think one of the best things you can do is be transparent. Tell students why you're asking them to do what you're asking them to do. This is something I've done in all of my assignments since the age of AI, generative AI, and even before that. Bigger assignments, often exams or larger portfolio assignments, but sometimes, well, more recently, I've actually been doing it in every single weekly homework assignment. Just a one sentence, this is why I'm asking you to do what I'm asking you to do. Because we assume students realize that there's value in what we're asking them to do. But anytime you make an assumption about students, I find that I'm generally pretty wrong about that. So just being transparent, being clear. Why are you having them write a discussion forum post and reply to 3 peers? Everyone hates that assignment because it just seems like busy work. But if you shift that from write a discussion forum post and reply to 3 peers because you have to or because of a grade, that's very different than write a discussion forum post and reply to 3 peers because I want you to share your voice and be part of this classroom community, and we're going to learn together how we can communicate and collaborate on these critical issues. Also, writing and being able to respond to others' thoughts is an important 21st century employability skill that you'll need in your future career, right? There's a difference between those 2 assignments. One, students are just doing it because they have to and they're not super motivated. The others, they're realizing, hey, actually replying to a discussion forum post to my peers is an important life skill that I need to build. So one of the frameworks that I love is the TILT framework. It's the Transparency in Learning and Teaching project in higher education. If you're not familiar with this, I will throw this into the chat here. And it's a kind of very basic website, but what I like on their website is their example assignments and prompts. And so you can see across all sorts of different subjects. Let's go to just calculus here. You'll see an example of the less transparent or original assignment and the more transparent one further down. And here you'll see transparency in purpose, task, and criteria. That's what that framework is all about. So what's the purpose? Why am I asking you to do this assignment? What are you being asked to do? And how will I evaluate or grade your assignment? Again, this takes a little bit more time to add this to the top of an assignment or tell this to students in class, but it does make a big difference in motivation and engagement and learning. And so you can see a whole bunch of examples here by different subjects. As I showed you, you kind of see the less transparent, more transparent, purpose, task, criteria. I don't use those specific terms, but I still have that level of transparency. So here's an example assignment that I just had a couple weeks ago in my class. Take a look really quickly, and if you're willing to, in the chat box, write where you see areas of transparency in this assignment. Just write in the chat box what part of this text is transparent to students. Or you can come on over the microphone if you're willing, just share your thoughts. Where did I put transparency here? Yeah, establishing the context for the assignment. So here's what we did in class, and here's what I'm asking you to do and why. Anything else you're noticing? No AI use, yeah. Wasn't sure if anyone would catch that, right? So let's talk about transparency. Here, we explored a lot of tools, but without reflection, this can easily be forgotten. So I'm saying, hey, you have to engage in reflection in this class. You can't just go through, learn things, and then forget about it. And then I say, criteria. Here's exactly what you need to do. It should have at least 12 pages, text and visuals on each page, because if I don't give them that transparency, I find that they, one, get frustrated in trying to guess what they need, and two, actually usually don't meet my expectations. So I have to make that clear to them. And then this is not part of the TILT framework, but it's something that I'm transparent about as needed. I actually allow and encourage AI use a lot in my class, but there are assignments I absolutely do not want them to use it, and I have to remind them in those specific assignments and be transparent and say, you're not using AI for this assignment because I need to see your reflection, your thinking. Those are all different areas of transparency. And look at the difference between, like, if I just had these activity directions right here, all the way down to this comic book graphic novel should have these pages, and I removed everything in the top and the bottom here, right? So that is a less engaging, less motivating task because students are just going in, seeing what they have to do and do it. But here, instead, I'm describing why they need to do what they need to do. The next part of the trust model is real-world applications. David Wiley, a famous educator, once said there's a difference between disposable assessments and renewable assessments. Disposable assessments are the ones everyone understands the ultimate destiny is the garbage can. This happens far too often. For example, you assign a student to write a 2-page paper, they write the paper, you grade it and return it to the students, they quickly check their grade, maybe look at the comments you wrote, maybe not, and then throw the paper away. Right? This happens far too often, especially in higher education, is you give students assignments because you just need to grade them. And those are considered disposable assignments. Students, in many cases, don't even look at the feedback you give. They just look at the grade and move on. So David encourages educators to shift to renewable assignments, ones that add value to the world in some way. And this is something I try to do with every class, and especially every big assignment. Some examples, I have my students create children's books for their younger peers or for younger classrooms. So in the week that we go into digital citizenship, I have my students who are future teachers create books on either Book Creator, Story Jumper, Storybird, or even Google Slides book format. And they create a book around a topic of interest to them related to digital citizenship. It might be cyberbullying. It might be creating strong passwords, being an active bystander. And they create those books and then they share them out with friends and family and get feedback on their books. In other examples, I love to have students go to social media and advocate for change or bring awareness to an issue. Sometimes I have students create TikTok-style videos or Instagram-worthy videos, and they just love those assignments. In other cases, like this one here, I have my students evaluate the accessibility of tools and apps. And across the board, most digital tools and apps are not accessible still to this date. And so I have my students go to social media and actually write about it. In this case, my student wrote about how Kahoot early on was not accessible to those who are blind or visually impaired. And this student actually received replies from someone who worked at Kahoot because social media kind of like levels the hierarchy of anyone can reach out to anyone. In other cases, I love doing an assignment like this. This is a Google branching form, and I have my students basically create a game using Google Forms, and they have to teach others how to identify real images versus fake images, real websites versus fake websites, and build their information and AI literacy skills. And so it's a whole branching Google form in that they pick a yes or no, and then based on their response, they get immediate feedback and then move on to the next thing. And I have them take whatever they create and go give it to at least 5 to 7 friends or family members and have them try out the game and collect that feedback and share out with the group. Another example, I have my students redesign inaccessible materials or products or hostile architecture. In this case, a student was looking at the nutrition labels on food packages, and she said her dad, who was having trouble seeing, really struggled to look at the very tiny text. And so she redesigned that based, bringing in a QR code and other ways to make it just easier to see. So that's a real world innovation. In other cases, I've had students write pages for an open access book, which has almost 1 million views at this point, and it's all entirely student written. They write pages every semester, and I pick the best of the best pages to be included in the book, and then they also get a publication credit on their resume. And what I found across the board is looking at these type of projects in a research study that I did is that when students engage in these renewable assignments, not only does it help them achieve the course learning objectives, but it increases their motivation, improves attitudes about learning, and supports the development of valuable 21st century skills. If you are wondering about how to engage students in renewable assignments and you're like, I don't know where to get started, I have this choice board here. It's an open access choice board. Some of these tools, I think for the most part, it's pretty up to date. Some of these tools change and whatnot. I'm going to throw it into the chat. But basically, sometimes I'll just say, okay, we just learned this topic. Go here, pick, anything on this choice board and create something to teach others about whatever we just learned. We just learned about digital citizenship. They might come here and design a comic and then share it out with friends and family and get that feedback. Or they might build a virtual tour. Like, what's great about choice boards is that students, I don't have to deal with student frustration. If they pick a tool they don't like, they just go pick another tool, or the one that they're stuck with, they just go pick another tool. And so it's very student engaging. But just to know that there's a lot of tools out there, as you see here, and this is just a few of the many out there, where students can create media and open educational resources pretty much with ease and then share those out with the world. Next one is universal design for learning. This is one of my favorite frameworks for learning. If you look at this comic here, it kind of really boils it down to the key aspect. So there's someone shoveling the snow off the stairs, and a person in a wheelchair comes up and says, hey, if you shovel the ramp, everyone can get in. And the person says, I had not thought about that. The concept of universal design really goes back to construction way back in the 50s. And universal design came out and said, how do we create buildings that everyone can access? And so when you're thinking about how do you help people go from one floor to another in a building, rather than putting in stairs, you might have an escalator or an elevator or a ramp, because someone in a wheelchair, someone with a stroller, someone with mobility issues can all get up the elevator or escalator. But if you only have stairs, then you've created a barrier for a lot of people. So the concept of universal design for learning builds on that and says, how do we break down those barriers? How do we get rid of stairs and create more ramps for learning? And there's three kind of aspects: multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression. If you're not familiar with this framework, let's see here. Let's get you to the UDL guidelines here. It's worth exploring. There's a kind of a really detailed overview, and you can click on every link within this framework to learn more details. But I think it, for me, honestly, just boils down to choice. Giving students multiple ways to learn something, giving students choices, bringing students' voice and identities into the classroom are all ways to break down barriers. Here's an example assignment that I give where students are given multiple ways to learn something. So it's not just read, which happens all the time in higher education, but now it's you can watch a video, read some text, you can explore a tutorial, or even play a game, or do all of these things, because it's going to help you access information in a lot of different ways. Or my favorite, as I mentioned, is giving students choice. You can create a comic book or graphic novel. That's not a ton of choice, but that is choice. And they have a lot of choice in this assignment here, where they had to show how they interact with technology. This was their kind of pre-course assignment. This was their first assignment of the semester in a class about digital tools and apps. They had to think about how they use every single app on their phone and tablet in a way for learning or teaching, and create a comic book or graphic novel to show me that. This helped improve their reflection, but it also brought their authentic selves into the class. And so you see several different examples here of students' comic books, from outer space to superhero style to just very basic. And they could use any tool of their choosing. Most used Canva because we have access to that at UMass. But this is what the power of student choice is. There was no barriers to this assignment because students could choose what app they wanted to use to create it. They could make a graphic novel, a comic book. They could use Google Slides. They could use Canva. They could talk about any of the apps on their phone of their choosing. And another example here, this is one I just did. I have students exploring AI, and I have a couple students in my class, to be honest, who are adamant that they will never use AI, and they would rather take a 0 on an assignment than use AI. It's an issue I've been coming up with against a couple times. And so for my week that we explored AI, I decided to give all sorts of choices. They could just design something without using AI about the critical issues of AI. They could explore AI. They could debate AI. They could draft an AI policy, or write a blog post, or design a gem, or design a college survival survival guide. I was actually honestly surprised how many students picked the college student survival guide out of all of these options. But it wasn't everyone. There was just a lot of different choices across the board. I have a whole website of like interactive choice boards and learning materials and that my colleague and I have created. It's mostly for K-12 teachers. But it's like if you want to like get inspiration for ways to bring choice into your classroom, these are all open access choice boards that you can just check out, explore, and think about how you choice, like a choice board, or even just 2 choices into your class. The S of the trust model is social knowledge construction. I mean, just think about learning and how it happens. Learning is social. You listen to others, you talk with others, you debate with others, you read books written by others. And yet when students come into the classroom, they're told, don't collaborate, that's cheating. Right? Don't talk to others. I need to see your specific thoughts. And again, there's nothing wrong with individual assignments and individual assessments, but it's just kind of strange in a world where so much learning is happening socially, and then they go into the classroom and it's like, just don't interact with others. Or the only time you interact with others is in a group project where people really just don't get along or it doesn't go well. So when it comes to social knowledge construction, I think there's so many ways to engage students in social learning beyond the group project. In this example, one of my doctoral students who taught tech at a local high school, he had his entire class work together to create a virtual reality video, 360 degrees, on domestic violence awareness. So the whole class worked together, they each took on different roles, and then they actually went out in the community to different festivals and shared what they had created. In this example, I have students do innovative design projects where they have to solve an issue on campus and create a product to solve that issue. And then they do a Shark Tank style pitch to the class where they have like 2 minutes to get the class to kind of vote on their idea. I mean, look at the social learning engagement here. It's group work, but everyone's involved. There's voting involved. So everyone's participating in the learning. Or there's this type of learning, social media, as I mentioned before. I love asking my students to create TikTok style videos or Instagram worthy videos. I never say you have to use TikTok. I say TikTok style. Some use TikTok, some use just whatever movie or film app is on their phone. And they have a lot of fun because they're familiar with social media. And, you know, people like these book talk influencers, they literally are teaching others to about books that they think are worthwhile to explore. So this is another way that you can engage students in social learning is social media. Or one of my favorite things to do is I ask students to write sometimes blog posts or papers. And if I find ones that are super inspiring or well written, I'll send them to my friend, Rochelle Danae Poth, who writes a really popular education blog, and she'll pick some of them and actually publish them as guest posts on her blog, like this one written by my students here. And they also got a publication credit. And then last, this is my ultimate favorite, and I think this is something easy that you all can do this week, is having students for whatever assignment they're doing, share what they've created, what they've written, what they've done with at least 3 to 5 friends or family members, get feedback, write that feedback down, and then write a reflection on any changes they made to whatever they created based on that feedback. So I do that with nearly every homework assignment, although I've kind of brought it down a notch because students were like, do we have to every week get feedback from others? So now I do it kind of maybe 3/4 of the semester. I'll say, oh, you created this digital citizenship book, as I mentioned, share that with 3 to 5 friends or family members and get feedback. But what I found is when students do that, they are more motivated to engage in learning and they're more motivated to put in the effort because they have to share their work with others rather than being disposable, that they just submit the assignment to me and no one else sees it and then I grade it and send it back and they never look at it again. So there's a lot of tools for social learning, right? So back in the pandemic days, I had a lot of colleagues who told me, oh, I can't engage my students in social learning or community building online or remotely. But that's not really the case. There's actually a lot of tools where you can engage in social learning, from like the entire Google Workspace suite to Canva is collaborative, Microsoft Teams, Slack. There's like digital whiteboards, like idea boards and Padlet. So there's a lot of tools out there where if you want to bring more social learning into your class, this is the book that my students have written that I was telling you about that kind of walks through different tools. I'll throw that into the chat. And then the last part of the trust model here is trial and error. So learning outside of the classroom literally happens through trial and error every single day. Let's talk about my experience with my 3-year-old. As a parent, if I were to have to take a class and there was a midterm assignment on getting my child to go to sleep and stay asleep all night, I would fail miserably. Oh my goodness. It took 2.5 years to get my kiddo to sleep through the night. And in that process, I tried everything under the sun of adjusting the temperature in the room, which socks he had on, which diaper he had on, the level of the volume in the room, the lighting in the room, like 5,000 things to get this kiddo to sleep through the night. But imagine that, like, I was in this parenting course. I have this midterm. I have one chance to show that I can do this, and then I can't. And that's it, right? I failed. I'm a terrible parent because I had my one chance and I failed. And while that might seem extreme, that's literally how learning happens in higher education far too often. Students have 3 chances the entire semester to show what they've learned. And what happens if the night before they were up late working a job because they're trying to support their family, or they were caretaking for an elder person in their family, or helping out with childcare in their family, or they were just sick, or whatever it is. And maybe you drop one of their grades to kind of even that out. But it's just, I find it really odd to me that so much learning in higher education is only exemplified through high stakes assignments and assessments, when learning outside of the classroom is all through trial and error. I literally just got a brand new car a couple of days ago. It has all of the technology in the world, and I have only learned by pressing lots of buttons and sometimes getting a little too close to other cars, and then my car beeps and yells at me. But again, that's all trial and error. So Justin Nanu said it best: learning is a process that requires risk, failure, and making connections, but current assessment practices don't reward it, and in many cases discourage it. Like if someone takes a risk or fails, it's often a 0, and that's your only chance. So if you want to increase motivation in learning, providing more opportunities for low stakes trial and error. I'm not saying get rid of high stakes assignments and assessments, but if you have a big project that's due at the end of the semester, maybe you can have smaller tasks along the way so that students can take a risk, fail, get feedback from you, and then build up to that task. Or same thing with a test. You could do some low stakes trial and error quizzes where there's no grade attached and they can just practice leading up to that. So this was the trust model for engaging learning, increasing rigor, transparency, real-world applications, UDL, Universal Design for Learning, social knowledge construction, and trial and error. A really quick example of what this looks like: I used to have my students analyze privacy policies, and I would just have them go into a privacy policy of an app or tool and do like a mind map, like how's that data collected, how's it shared, how's it used. And honestly, generative AI tools like ChatGPT could do this assignment in seconds. And I'm like, why am I asking my students to do that? So I've changed that assignment. Instead of just analyzing privacy policies, they now, for a bigger assignment, have to basically help others take control of their data and privacy to protect them from harms. I do this by asking them to convince at least 30 people, anyone who will listen to them, to take more control of their data. So they can convince them to disable cookies or change their privacy settings, change their location sharing settings, remove apps. They can decide, right? So here it's real world application. They're convincing others to do something they just learned how to do in class. And it's very social knowledge construction. Ooh, sorry. And dry throat here. So Universal Design for Learning is like, I tell them, you can decide how to convince people. You can make a video. You can just talk with them. You can design a website or a series of memes. And some students tried one thing, like they made a website, they sent it to their friends and family members, and no one looked at it. And then they just had to go talk with them. So that was kind of the choice built in, and the trial and error as well. And here's one final product.
Hi, John and Nina. Thank you for listening to everything I had to teach you about privacy settings. After my talk with you, which apps are you going to limit settings for?
I think I'm gonna choose Snapchat. I just don't want them to have my information.
Awesome. And what about you, Nina?
I'm gonna choose Outlook. I don't want them to have access to my camera.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to what I had to teach you about restricting privacy settings. After listening to what I had taught you, which app are you choosing to reduce settings for?
I went
all the way down.
There, okay. I am choosing to turn it off of Instagram.
No more location?
Yep.
Great.
So I actually just did this assignment last week, but it was during class time. And I said, you have two options. You can make a TikTok style video to teach others about taking control of their data privacy in your table group, or you can go out in the building right now and convince any 5 people that you find to change their privacy settings. Half my groups created a TikTok style video, and the other half actually went out and convinced some of my colleagues and the staff members in the building to change their privacy settings. This type of activity AI can't do, and students were excited to do. Like, they just got up from their tables and kind of ran out of the classroom to go do their thing. This is how the trust model can really make a difference. And you don't have to do all of the things. You might just start with transparency, or you might try out some choice through UDL, or you might get into some more trial and error and just take some high stakes assignments and bring them down to low stakes assessments and practices. I want to cover one more framework here, and I know this is a lot of information, but know that you will have full access to these slides and also the recording to re-review. The first model I gave you, the trust model, was about teaching because of or without AI, right? AI is out there, and we need to think about ways to improve motivation and engagement and learning because these tools are out there. This model is how to teach with AI, again, because it's out there, because students are using it. And far too often they're using it to automate, right? We saw in that Super Bowl commercial, we've seen how AI is automating emails and all sorts of things. And I think that is the least effective and most problematic use of these tools, especially given all of their ethical issues like environmental impact and exploitation of human labor. So I came up with this AUGMENT model to think about, when are there times that using AI is actually effective, purposeful, and meaningful in education? Similarly, each letter of the AUGMENT model stands for something, and I'm going to kind of go through this rather quickly because I want to make sure that there's time for questions. First and foremost is adjusting learning materials to enhance accessibility and understanding. This is something where AI can break down barriers to learning by making something more digitally accessible, by supporting students with reading text. This is actually one of the most common uses of AI by students. I talk with my students often. I'm like, how do you use AI? And many will say, I have a text that I'm really struggling to read, and I'll upload it to AI to get a summary, or I'll upload it to Google Notebook LM, and I'll have it create a podcast version of that text, and I'll listen to the podcast, and that helps me learn. That is all about accessibility and improving understanding. In the United States, we have the American Disabilities Act, brand new Title II law that basically means all materials from government and schools have to be digitally accessible per the WCAG 2.2 guidelines. It's something that educators are not familiar with, but basically every material, every syllabus and slides and class website and learning management system has to be accessible. AI can actually help you do that. If you're not familiar with those guidelines, AI has been trained on those guidelines. So a couple examples here of how AI can help make learning more accessible or improve understanding. Rewriting text, right? So sometimes students will say, rewrite this for a 5th grade reading level. Or there's some EduGems that Eric Kurtz, he's a Google certified educator, has created. They're basically a gem, and Gemini is like your own version of like a mini chatbot that you can program to do whatever you want it to do, but without any coding knowledge. And he has text rewriter. So basically, you can use this gem, you can upload any text, and you can change the reading level, the length, the tone, the style, or the format. And he has some other ones like alt text, where you can basically make sure that your slides or website or wherever you have images have a description in them for screen readers to make sure they're digitally accessible. So you can upload an image, and this will walk you through how to write alt text. That's a really helpful resource. I'll throw the EduGems into the chat here because he has a whole bunch for educators. One on like choice board. You want to bring choice into your classroom? Maybe try out this gem. I haven't tried out all of them. But Eric is pretty awesome, and so maybe worth exploring. Let's get back here. So I did EduGems. The most common tool by students, at least in the United States, the high school and college level, is Google Notebook LM. If you have not used this tool, use it. I think it's worth trying out if you have access to. And pretty much you need just a Gmail account to have access to. But in terms of breaking down barriers to learning, you can upload a single text, you can upload a whole bunch of text, and then on the right-hand side, you see it can create a podcast, a video overview. It does even a lot more. That was actually an older version of Google Notebook LM. So here's one I've created for my students on copyright, fair use, Creative Commons. And you can make audio, video, data table, infographic, flashcard, mind map. So it just provides multiple ways to access information, which is one of the Universal Design for Learning guidelines in their framework. And so I could, for example, like look at slides to learn about copyright. I could watch a video, an explainer video here.
Let's talk about copyright. That big.
Or my favorite is the interactive podcast. See if we can get this working today. Might not just time-wise. Oh, okay, we'll try it really quick.
Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so think about this. You're putting together maybe a work presentation or, a video for school.
Oh, hey, our listener wants to join in. What's up?
Can I show a Taylor Swift video in my biology class?
That is a fantastic question, and it gets right to the heart of this confusion.
Okay, let's unpack this one immediately because that scenario is so common in schools.
Right, so the short answer is maybe, but only under specific narrow circumstances.
And it hinges entirely
And so as you can
on...
see, I can actually stop the podcast and ask questions, and it will then reply to my questions. What's really cool is you can even make these audio overviews in upwards of 100 different languages. That's another way to break down barriers to learning. And then students can ask their questions in their home or native language. So I think it's a really great resource for improving accessibility and understanding. But just giving students Google Notebook LM is not going to be enough, I have discovered. I gave students that notebook on copyright, fair use, Creative Commons. They analyzed each aspect of it. Here's the example. They had to create a screen recording of which one worked best for them. And what I found is that 2 weeks later, no one can answer a single question about copyright, fair use, and Creative Commons. When I did that assignment again, in this example here, they used the notebook, but then their final assignment was to create a TikTok style or Instagram worthy video teaching others about what they learned. That's what really made the difference. So again, when it comes to AI is just a tool. If I just gave them that tool, the learning is actually going to be pretty low unless they're super motivated. It's up to the teacher to make that learning really stick. And that was the TikTok style or Instagram worthy video. That's what happened. Or if I were to quiz them, do a pop quiz the next day, that would probably solidify more learning than waiting 2 weeks. But again, AI is just a tool. Next part of the AUGMENT model, and I'm going to fly through these last parts here. Uplifting creative thinking. So AI should never replace creative thinking, but this is one area that I think AI does better than humans because honestly, generative AI tools have been trained on the entire internet. Well, at least what's written on English in the entire internet, but that's still more than any single person can hold in their head. These tools can help you with coming up with ideas, generating prototypes, scaffolding the writing process or the creative process, generating media of all sorts. For example, you could have your students write a song and AI could create the album cover for your song. Or you could create a cover of a board game. This is for the American Revolution in Pokemon Go style and say, now you as a class go create the actual board game. What pieces are you going to design in a, Tinkercad, for example? What events are you including in the American Revolution that you think are worthwhile as part of this game? What are the game mechanics, right? So I just gave them like an image to start and then they have to come up with all of the rest. There's also the Canvas mode in Gemini where you can code games or artifacts, simulations without any coding knowledge here, like a Donkey Kong style dividing fractions game. And this is another way to spark creative thinking is having your students design these or you design one and then have them go out and use another program like Scratch or another tool to create their own type of game. The key that I've seen in research is that it's humans plus AI is more creative across the board than humans or teams of humans without AI, or AI. So it's really humans and AI working together are the most creative. There's several research studies to show that. And so here's how I bring it into my classroom. For example, I was having my students collect data and they had to write a survey. They had to come up with their 10 questions first. Then they prompted AI to come up with questions, and then they could choose whether to include their questions or the AI-generated questions in their final survey. And this way, it got them to analyze the AI-generated questions. And I'm going to be honest, my students are really terrible at writing survey questions. So AI generally comes up with better questions than the ones they have written. And they start to see, oh, I need to revise my original ones, or I'm going to include this one from AI. And their surveys across the board have gotten vastly better. By the way, I've structured this assignment. In another case, sometimes my students just get stuck with creative thinking, and that's really not the part of the assignment that I want them to focus on. Like in this example, I was having my students who are future teachers design a global collaboration project to have their class collaborate with other classes around the world. And I had one group that got stuck on coming up with their idea for the project for more than half of class. And so they lost all of that time on like the design, just coming up with the idea. So in future classes, I said, if after 5 minutes you're stuck with an idea, just go to AI to get that idea and then spend the remainder of class actually building out your global collaboration project website. And last things here. Oh, another things I love to do is I have my students design like inventions or prototypes to solve issues around campus. This one here is for icy walkways. And then we go to AI and turn their like hand-drawn sketches into realistic 3D renderings. And I have students who are future elementary teachers for the most part. And many of them are like, I'm not a science person. I'm not a math person. I'm not an engineer. But they're able to hand draw sketches of their ideas. And then AI kind of brings those to life and they get really excited about that. And then they ended up having to write a proposal to the university and they include their prototype and say, here's what we really need. You can see all of their prototypes here. Over the last couple of years, I've collected them on a Padlet. There's some pretty interesting ones. Next part of the augment model is generating real-time around-the-clock feedback. AI can provide all sorts of feedback, not just text-based, but this is one of the most common uses by students is that, oftentimes they go to their class and they see their professor maybe 3 hours a week, maybe once for office hours. And outside of that, they don't have access to help. And so they're turning to AI for that. And there's tools like the study and learn mode built into ChatGPT or guided learning in Gemini or education mode and Perplexity and Claude that are designed to be a 24/7 tutor. And research has found that when students have access to AI, it reduces math anxiety because they have basically 24/7 access to support, which is very different than you leave the classroom and that's it. You have to wait another week to get feedback. The feedback doesn't have to be just text-based. You could go to Google Notebook LM, for example. Students could upload a text that they have written, and you could create a podcast, an audio overview of it, and they could listen to that podcast to see how others, in this case AI, talks about their work. And that's a different type of feedback. I'm going to skip this one here, time-wise. The key here with feedback is AI is just one part of the feedback. It never, ever should replace instructor feedback or peer feedback. In the global collaboration project that I had my students do, they got feedback from AI, which was really cool because AI was simulating different perspectives from around the world and how it would engage with the global collaboration project. And then they said, you also have to go talk with humans and get feedback. And so this was something that was really cool because the feedback given using different personas was things on like language accessibility or time zone or technology access that honestly my students had not thought of, that I would have given them feedback on anyways, but AI through the prompts that I gave them different perspectives they hadn't considered, and they used that to improve their final project. And again, these tools are multimodal, so you can have students take a picture of a website they've created or a PowerPoint slide and get feedback on that as well. It's not just text-based feedback. Flying through this last part here, these tools absolutely can motivate critical thinking. They could also offload or replace critical thinking. It depends how you use these tools. And the way I like to think about it is generative AI prompting you to think, or are you prompting AI to do the thinking for you? So for example, maybe you're teaching cardiovascular diseases or nursing, you can have AI run a simulation where you are a registered nurse in an emergency room department, you're giving vital signs, and you have to use your knowledge of the cardiovascular system to figure out what's going on with a patient. And you could create gems for that. I don't have time to cover this, but Really quickly, I've had teachers who create their own gems, like a simulated debate partner or something that gives students, that encourages their deeper thinking. And you can create all of these gems without any kind of coding knowledge. You basically write an instruction for what kind of chatbot you want, and then you give that chatbot to students to interact with. You can create all sorts of interactive visualizations, like this one from Claude is the difference between spending your money on lottery tickets versus putting that money in the stock market and the growth over time. Or this one where I've created a privacy policy analyzer to help my students better understand privacy policies of tools and apps before using them. And then also AI itself can be an object of critical thinking. So you could have students analyze the environmental impact or the hallucinations, excuse me, or biases built into these tools. A lot of examples here, but time-wise, I'm just going to get through these last couple parts here. The next is empowering inquiry learning. So this is where students, say a student comes to you and they're like, I want to keep exploring this idea, but you don't have time to do that for every single student. Or maybe you're doing a makerspace in class or an inquiry learning project in class, but they need help on all of their individual projects. I do that in my classes. I have 60 students and no TA. So I often say, go to AI to help you walk step by step through this or think through this a bit more. And then I come and provide that feedback. AI, there's tools like Deep Research is now built into Google Notebook LM. Deep Research is a tool in ChatGPT and Gemini where you can basically get a market research report or literature review it's about 20 pages long and looks at between 50 and 100 different sources entirely generated by AI. So if you have students that have an interest, they could start there as just coming up with resources to explore. You can have AI come up with a hypothetical experiment and data for students to analyze before they get into designing their own experiment. Here's the deep research I was talking about. So in Gemini, you could have your question about mandatory voting around the world. It's going to start research and it's going to look at, it takes between 5 and 30 minutes to reply and then builds an entire research report. You can see all the websites at the bottom. And this is really what it looks like. This was a very sped up version of how long it takes. So you get this very long report, but that can kind of inspire students' inquiry learning. Woo, time-wise, nourishing student interest across the board. These tools, there's storybooks, there's artifacts you can create based on students' interest. You can turn your syllabus, your primary source, a text, video into a graphic novel using Google Notebook LM. This one's a really popular tool, and there's a whole video here I've embedded from Eric Kurtz on how to do that. I actually just did it with my syllabus, which I found really intriguing. So I'm going to show that really quickly here. Here's my syllabus. So I just have one source over here. And I had it basically create a graphic novel version of my syllabus. And here it is. And it walks them through. I find it a little bit overwhelming, but it's actually pretty intriguing. So, you want to inspire student interest, create a graphic novel version of a text and have them explore, critically analyze that. Or use AI as one of many options for doing an activity. We're going to create a data visualization. You could use a tool like Data GIF Maker or Napkin AI, or just another tool that's not AI based. Giving them that choice, again, creates more engagement and brings in more interest. And the last one here, finally, that was a lot, is Tailor Learning Support. These tools can be used to help you adapt learning assignments. Right now, most of my students use AI to do unlimited practice quizzes for upcoming exams, specifically for math and science classes, I found. Some students will use these tools to create study guides in their native or home language or outlines to guide their reading. There was a research study looking at more than 200,000 interactions from education accounts on Claude. And look at these terms like troubleshoot, explain, solve, tackle, provide assistance, explain. You find that students in many cases are actually using these tools to improve their learning rather than to do their learning for them. And so supporting or encouraging that in very specific cases, I find can be really helpful because honestly, students are already doing this, whether you realize it or not, is they're going to AI to break down barriers to learning and to get assistance when they're stuck on things outside of class. Google Notebook LM has study guides, flashcards, quizzes to help with that. There's tools like Goblin.tools that can take a big assignment and break it down into smaller tasks for students who struggle with executive functioning skills or really just breaking things down so that they can get started on a project. And so, that was a lot in just about 50 minutes here. This is the AUGMENT framework. Again, you'll have full access to these slides to dive more deeply, but the goal was to kind of provide you with 2 different frameworks and maybe think about if there's one thing you could take away from this that you could immediately bring into your practice, whether it's a new tool or the idea of choice or something like bringing transparency in, or just bringing AI into the classroom and thinking about strategic ways it can augment rather than automate learning. So I have a couple resources here, but what I want to get to you is the slides link. So I'm going to put this into the chat bot here, and then I'll take the last couple minutes here to answer any questions.
Wow, thank you so much, Torrey. For the sake of the recording, and in case I don't get a chance, I think I won't get a chance later, I'm going to say thank you so much for your talk and for your thoughts. You've squeezed in so much. A big thing for me was how you're not focused on the technology per se, or even the things around the technology, but on a lot of familiar age-old important stuff in learning and teaching, like trust and rigor and transparency and choice and access and accessibility and breaking down barriers. I think the 2 frameworks you've introduced us to, together with all of those great examples you've offered us, give us a really structured way to think about the decisions we're making at a time when there's a risk maybe of being led by the tools and led by the promoters of the tools rather than by our needs or our purpose. So look, as you've said yourself, there's a lot here I think that colleagues can take directly into their own practice and hopefully into wider institutional conversations as well.